US President Donald Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs on the 2nd of April, which was billed as America's Liberation Day, marks a seismic shift in global trade policy. It will have cascading effects on economies worldwide, both big and small. The reciprocal tariff policy, which imposes a baseline 10% tariff on all US imports, alongside targeted levies as high as 50% on some specific countries, is the most aggressive protectionist trade shift that we have seen since the 1930s. While Trump and his team have painted this as a corrective measure to try and supercharge domestic American industry and dismantle foreign trade barriers, this move has ignited fears of stagflation, breaking up of the global trading order, and potentially ushering in a global recession.
Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind.
The newly unveiled tariffs operate on a two-tier system. A universal 10% duty applies to all imports, while reciprocal tariffs target individual nations based on their existing trade barriers against American goods. So China, for example, faces a 34% tariff, the European Union 20%, India 26%, and Vietnam 46%. Each of these figures have been calculated to mirror each of these countries, their tariff and non-tariff restrictions on American products. In the case of China, there's an additional 20% of retaliatory tariffs which have already been imposed, which means it takes the total Chinese tariff on American products to 54%. Other than this, immediate measures include a 25% tariff on all imported vehicles effective midnight of April 2nd. Auto parts will also face an identical 25%, but that will be installed from a month's time from now. Canada and Mexico, despite their USMCA free trade agreement, will see 25% tariffs on non-compliant goods until stricter border controls are implemented.
We are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses if negotiations fail.
Everybody sit back, take a deep breath, don't immediately retaliate. Let's see where this goes, because if you retaliate, that's how we get escalation.
Yet the Trump administration's confidence is in sharp contrast with stark warnings from economists. Over 80% of surveyed economists and bankers on Wall Street predict that the tariffs will exacerbate inflation. It's currently at 5.5%. It could exceed 6%. It will also trigger retaliatory measures which are capable of shaving off up to 0.5% of US GDP. American households face price hikes on goods ranging from cars to medicines to agricultural produce. Tariffs will likely raise inflation and thereby eat into people's savings. Economists are also predicting at least $100 billion plus in US economic losses and up to 0.5% GDP contraction. Trump administration, on the other hand, says it could raise up to $700 billion of new revenues, thereby almost erasing America's $1 trillion trade deficit. Which way the economic cookie crumbles, that is still up in the air. But that's not all. Energy costs in the East Coast could spike up 20% if Canadian gas and electricity imports are taxed. The cost of cars could go up by at least $3,000 per unit.
The last time trade war on this scale has happened was in 1930s. Exactly in 1930, it was Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, and it led to a global recession worldwide. And if this trade war escalates, we could see a slowdown of the global economy on the scale of a global financial crisis of 2014 and possibly deeper. And this is the largest threat which would affect the whole world.
The ripple effects are already materializing. China has retaliated within hours, imposing 15% tariffs on US coal and natural gas, alongside 10% duties on agricultural machines as well as pickup trucks. The EU has drafted plans to reinstate tariffs on over $3 billion worth of American goods, and including bourbon whiskey and motorcycles. Canada is preparing 25% counter tariffs targeting American products. The US economic outlook as a result of all of this has darkened quite considerably. Goldman Sachs has revised its recession probability in the US to 35%. That's a greater than 1 in 3 chance of recession. With real wages stagnant since 2022, the tariffs are estimated to add at least $1,200 annually to average American household expenses. And that could force ordinary Americans to cut back on their spending. Retail giants like Target and Best Buy have already flagged margin pressures. A survey of the National Association of Manufacturers found 68%, more than 2/3 of members, delaying capital expenditures. Federal Reserve officials are privately warning that they may have to accelerate interest rate hikes if tariffs push core inflation above 6%, which could risk a debt crisis. The IMF's revised 2025 global growth forecast is in the range of minus 0.7% to plus 2.1%. That once again underscores the risk of contagion because of reciprocal tariffs.
President Trump referred to reciprocal tariffs. A reciprocal tariff would be 0, not 10%. The administration's tariffs have no basis in logic, and they go against the basis of our two nations partnership. This is not the act of a friend.
So, if you look at that,
So why then is Trump doing this? Why is he pushing the world, including America, to the brink of an economic cliff? And is there any historical parallel to what Trump is doing? What happened when America was a high tariff country? Did it lead to expanded global trade, or did it lead to the Great Depression? The specter of the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act looms large. That legislation raised American duties to 60% on over 20,000 imports. It triggered global retaliation. It collapsed international trade by 2/3 between 1929 and 1934. It was called the Great Depression. Eventually, the Depression also led to the Second World War. During that time, American exports plummeted more than 60%, exacerbating the unemployment crisis because of the Great Depression. Recovery came only after the Second World War through post-Bretton Woods institutions like GATT, which later became the World Trade Organization or the WTO. And these have been systematically, over the last 50 years, reducing tariffs. Trump's tariffs are currently less extreme than the Smoot-Hawley peak rates, but the risk is the same, that of economic stagnation. The 10% that Trump is levying as universal tariffs mirrors the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Act and its across-the-board approach, while targeted rates, whether it's 46% on Vietnam, 54% on China, 26% on India, it is exceeding or in the same ballpark as the 30% average US tariff during the worst of the Great Depression. The next few months and years will decide if Trump took the entire world, including America, back 100 years or so, or has he prepared his country, America, to be made great again?